I have found myself in this process of moving, having these thoughts of frustration of like, oh, I don't really feel like I'm getting as much done musically as I would. And then I'm just like, got to take a step back and go, hey, the season of my life I'm in this really beautiful season of handing off these things I've built. And that's really holy and sacred.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio, and Aisha Woods, Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and musician. Together, they talk with artists and industry insiders to discover our connection between music and faith. You can connect with us on Facebook or Twitter at Between Grooves. Now, here's James and Aisha.
Aisha, it's been a few weeks.
It has. I've missed you.
I've missed you too, and it's been just busy. Like, I love summertime, but I just find that it tends to get busy as well. We've had some issues with artists. Monday, as you know, is often a travel day, and so trying to nail down artists and people in this business and industry to actually have a conversation, sometimes it's difficult. So in all honesty, we've had lots of stuff booked. We've had some cancellations. We've had some rescheduling and stuff. And so this is the first time we've gotten together. And the other part of it is vacation time, whether it's yourself or myself or the summer festivals, because I know I'm usually away at least a couple of weekends with summer festivals, you know, and what we do at these festivals is we actually have conversations with these artists as well. So that's great for future episodes of Between the Grooves, but we are finally together.
Looking forward to those.
Yeah. And today we get to chat with Ben Grace. Now, Ben was a guest with us right at the beginning of 2020. So this was kind of pre-pandemic. And obviously a lot has happened since then. So let's get right into it with Ben Grace on Between the Grooves.
Good morning. I'm so sorry. Comedy of errors over here for us.
You know what I like about Ben's accent?
What's that?
He sounds like the boys from For King and Country.
Because they're from my country.
Exactly. I just love that accent. I really do. And I mean, I really shouldn't call it an accent because we all have accents when you think about it.
No, that's true.
It's true.
I probably sound Canadian, right?
It's funny that people think they don't have an accent, you know?
Right.
So I'm very aware I have an accent because I've been walking through America for 12 years with the accent, you know?
Right.
Right. Now, what's interesting, Ben, is I don't hear your accent when you sing your songs. How do you do that?
Well, see, accents are mostly in the vowels. And so when you're singing songs, you're elongating all of those vowels. And it's more work, I think, to actually make it. So there's a band in Australia called The Waifs, and they had this huge breakout single in the early 2000s called London Still. So it's like, and they would sing it with this very flat, I'm in London still. Like they would very, very deliberately, like, they'd have to really push the accent to make it happen. But,
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing when you hear like a Scottish person sing and they sound like super American, and then they start speaking and it's like, what happened?
Right.
So yeah, singing is kind of a accent-free zone for I mean, there are definitely words that you hear that pop out.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because it's elongating all of the words. It sort of flattens everything out. Yeah, I mean, it's also, I do a lot of harmony singing. I do a lot of singing with other people and harmonizing and backing up. And I think to a certain degree, you know, you sort of learn a cadence. And, you know, I learned, I think, you know, I mean, I've been singing my entire life, but like since moving here to the States, you know, doing a lot of backing up Americana artists, it makes a difference. But there's definitely, you know, on my first record, one of my producers, she was like, hey, there's a couple of words that you pronounce that will be dead giveaways to an American audience. So she really was like, you know, sing this kind of word this way. So we did a little bit of that on the first record.
Do you remember what those words were? Any of them?
I think rhetoric was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because I think we say it differently in Australia. I think we say rhetoric.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That would
so
make
she
you
was like, I think-
self-conscious if you see that in a song, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, I know, aluminum and aluminium. We say that differently. So
Wow. Tomato.
That's right. Potato,
Exactly.
tomato, clamato. Ben, do you find, especially when you sing background, that you're pronouncing less of the consonants and perhaps even less of the finishing of words because the main vocalist would be doing that for you?
100%. And I, when I produce people in the studio, I'm always coaching people to come in to sing backgrounds. I'm like, it's very different. You have to sing a little, you sing those consonants softer, and for some people, who've only been singing lead their entire life, that's really, really difficult. But, if they get in there really in their head about it, I'll be just like, don't worry about it. I'm probably just going to edit that later.
Right.
Because kind of when you're there in the studio, you can cut off the ends of words and you can soften the fronts and stuff. But it is about, if you're singing backgrounds, you're often really trying to match the vowel sound, and there's also a trick that a lot of background singers do where they don't even really sing the consonants. They just kind of get the big vowels in behind, and sometimes they might not even know the words properly, so they're just trying to match the vowel sound.
I've seen that, I've heard that, and I suppose it's not even a lazy way of singing because you have to be very conscientious and very meticulous to do something like that. But I found that I first found that when I was doing audio in my church. This was many years ago, and there was a group that sang, and they were amazing. Their harmonies were brilliant, and it was 4 people in the band. 3 of them sang, and the one played the keys or whatever. And I would listen to the lead vocalist, and of course I could listen on cue, and I could hear them singing. And so, while they're performing or even during sound check, I'm listening to all of the vocals and I'm listening to the background vocals. And it's like, I cannot understand what you're saying. You're not saying the words at all, but together they sounded amazing.
Yeah. And often I think with background vocals, there's that trick to not always hitting some of the smaller words. Cause if there's a fast paced kind of line, it can get very jumbled and very, cluttered quickly.
Sure.
So you're just sort of locking in on some of the kind of the really highlight words, or when the phrase the phrases sort of got started. If it's like "it is finished," for instance, and "finished" is the big, the big note, you don't sing the "it is" necessarily, or you just sort of like sing like a small part of it. So sometimes it's finished.
Yep.
Which is hilarious.
That's a good lesson. That's not just for recording. That's a good lesson for background vocalists in church, because they wouldn't know necessarily, given the fact that many of them are volunteers and they just wouldn't know any better. But that's a good lesson for them to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into trying to sing and sound together. I mean, I think that's just also a lesson in life, really. Oftentimes, is that like how we kind of collaborate and fall in step with each other is we all sometimes take turns, someone just being the person who's sort of leading the conversation and the rest of us sort of support that. It's an intriguing kind of concept that I think kind of relates to a lot of things.
Let's take a step back for a moment. The last time we chatted was the beginning of 2020. We were talking everything from crowdfunding to social justice to human rights to empathy. And one thing we did not touch on then was the pandemic. And that was really
something.
Well, and the reason why is we made a conscious decision not to talk about the pandemic because we figured, this is just going to be, it's going to come and go fairly quickly. Let's not make this conversation date sensitive or limit the episode to a pandemic related conversation. Little did we know that a few years later maybe we should have talked about the pandemic.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
So what has changed for you in, I guess, 3 years?
Oh man, so much has changed. I just moved to San Diego when COVID hit. I'd been here for less than 9 months. I moved into a brand new house a month before COVID with my now wife, and we had 2 housemates as well. And we were just like, hey, there's, we 4 adults and my stepdaughter that comes and goes. We have her week on, week off. and 2 cats and a dog. And we're like, oh, well, we'll be all going off to our jobs and all, we all kind of doing the thing. And then, a month later, we're all locked down together. And so we started live streaming like crazy because we didn't really know what else to do. And we live streamed every Thursday night and every Sunday for, the Thursday night lasted for about 15, 16 months. And then the live streaming on Sunday, we did up until October of last year, when the church we're part of there, we were live streaming with, we closed our doors at the end of last year. So we were pretty much, the live stream on a Thursday we called Heathen Happy Hour because we had a podcast called Heathen. And it was myself and Karen, my wife, who were part of Story and Tune, and then our housemate Matthew, who has a drag personality called Flamey Grant, so Christian drag personality. And and we learned over 700 covers, and we went live for a couple of hours every Thursday, and we sang together, and we sang, and we had conversations with people, and we just generally tried to uplift the community around us by allowing us to kind of mourn together and grieve, and sometimes laugh on the events. There was so much happening politically and in the world. It was a really wonderful time because we still stayed very, very connected to community, to life. And out of that period of time, Flamey made an album which has, Derek Webb and Jennifer Knapp and Semler and a lot of these folks who've been huge in the Christian scene, and who for one reason or another has been pushed to the edges, but who are trying to take up their space, in this kind of genre called Christian music. So I produced that Flamey Grant album. It's gone on to do gangbusters, and Flamey is touring all over the place and just won the Kerrville Folk Festival this year, one of the winners there. So it's really wonderful to see what, that blossomed out of the pandemic. It blossomed out of this sort of necessity of us trying to stay connected and entertained, and to use our gifts to encourage people during a pretty dark time for a lot of people.
It's not only being connected and entertained, but was this also a way to make a living? Because nobody was doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely started out at first just kind of, we didn't really know what we're doing. None of us really did, really, honestly. We were all just kind of making up as we went along. And, we had a tip jar initially, and I think with that tip jar we had up there for about a year or so. Eventually we kind of really sort of stopped talking about it. There were people who still would tip us every single week, but we were also very aware of how many people in that particular community who would come on the live streams, people who had lost their jobs, people, kind of were trying, were just sort of struggling generally. And so for us, we'd also found other little hustles along the way that had enabled us to stay afloat. I mean, I'm not going to lie, in 2020, I earned as much as I earned in 1998 fresh out of high school as an intern at a credit union. It was a very, very lean year. But,
and we can laugh about it now, but
right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I think I just kept on saying is we've just got to stay visible, as musicians, and we've got to stay in top of mind so that when this thing is over, we're the first people think about, to come out. And I think I'd always hoped, there were many of us who were just live streaming, and I was like, I was really hoping that once the pandemic was over, like, oh, my stars, like these musicians really helped us through, and we'd love to go out and see live music again. And I found that sort of has happened, and it sort of hasn't happened. I think what happened for a lot of folks was a lot of us were doing it tough. I mean, all of us really were in many, many ways. But, folks who are kind of doing it tough financially, might have been living on their credit cards and that kind of stuff. They're kicking it down the hill and thinking we'll catch up later. and so a lot of folks, to get out after the pandemic, it feels like, well, that's a luxury. I'm still digging myself out of the hole. And so I get that. But I think we're just starting to see this year, which is wild. So 3 years, we're just starting to see house shows come back. We're just starting to see kind of venues with full capacities. It's a long time. 3 years in the life of a musician in your career. It's a very, very long time. And a lot of my friends didn't really make it through. A lot of my friends, quit the business and went and did something else. And I'm super, super grateful today to be sitting here and still be a working musician and making my living through all sorts of different ways, making records, touring, still a little bit of live streaming here and there. And, it's been a sort of a strange gift to be able to understand that I can pivot and do something different and be creative in the way that I make money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got to have multiple streams at this point.
That's exactly what was going through my mind. Is I suppose from what I've seen, anyways, the pandemic has forced musicians, particularly like that industry, the music industry, to look at different revenue different means, streams, different ways to look at making money, and not just during the pandemic, but now as well. And that's the reason why, not the reason why, but that's why you often see artists when they've got a gig and they're performing. Of course, they've got the merch table. Maybe they're live streaming the event at the same time, and there is that tip jar or some ways to help support the artists. For years, artists have been using crowdfunding to help record or help finance the recording process to come up with music. So I suppose that part has changed in your life as well, hasn't it, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think most successful musicians I know have always had that multiple streams of revenue. Whether it be also a sponsorship deal, with someone that's kind of helping them, either giving them, gear for touring or giving them a small stipend to be a spokesperson for a brand, So successful musicians have always hobbled things together and kind of figured it out, because you have those, you put out a record, you go out on your tours and support that record. And that's a season, and that often lasts, depending on how big you are, a couple of months to, a year or two. But then in between, then you've got this kind of period where that's not being exploited anymore, and it's not being played on the radio anymore, and it's not, hasn't got quite the excitement as normal. And so then you've got to figure out how to do those things in that fallow season in between. It's an interesting kind of life. And I think that, it requires creativity on a number of fronts. And I'm one of those weird musicians that I like the business side of it. I like spreadsheets, and I like trying to figure out how to make it work. And
nice.
Yeah. And so for me, the pandemic was just one of those things. I mean, initially for sure, that shock of like, wow, everything that I knew how to do is just instantly gone. But after a few weeks, I think we started to try and, be like, actually, I've been doing this a long time, just like going from job to job and doing different things. So, yeah. So it's been a fun time to try and just be really creative in the way we do it.
Yeah, sure. Are you still writing music? What does that process look like for you now?
Yeah, I mean, what was strange is, I've been tracking since about 2013, 2014 for no other purpose than just for my own sake. I've been tracking how many songs I write a year. And about every 2 years, I have a bumper year and write a lot more songs. And often that lines up. I've been in the kids' music space for 10 years.
Nice.
Writing songs for kids' television. And so often it lines up with one of those projects, kind of aligns, because, I'll end up writing 20 songs that year just for that, kids show.
That's great.
And yeah, so, that happened in 2017. I wrote a season, and then 2019, I wrote a season. That 2019 was when I first met my wife, and we wrote a lot of songs together that year. We had wrote almost 50 songs that year, which was, a record for me. 2020, I think we wrote 11. But because we were live streaming so much and doing all that kind of stuff, and also sort of really took advantage of that time, I built out in a closet in our back room, I built out a vocal booth. And so we were just recording a lot.
There you go.
And so I was doing a lot. I think over 2020, I think we released 22 songs. So we're just trying to keep content out there. I hate that word content. I'm not a content creator, but we were releasing things and making, trying to keep things out there. But so we weren't writing as much. I think partly because just the stimulus wasn't there. I think I get a lot of ideas from regular life and conversation with folks and travel and but since then we've been writing a lot. So with 2021, we wrote a new season of a show called Babble Bop, which is on NBC Peacock. And we wrote a lot of songs that year, and then we've been continuing to write a lot of songs since then. So there's always there's always a reason to write, but I think oftentimes, if there's not a project attached to it, or kind of a record you're working on, like we just released our Story in Tune debut album a couple of months ago. If you don't have a reason to write, sometimes you're not always finishing things. I wouldn't say I'm not writing, I'm always writing, but it's just a matter of finishing. So I only count the things I finish. If I count the things I wrote,
I think 2020
every single day.
Yeah, I think 2020 would have been a difficult year to actually finish writing, just because you're focused on so many different areas, and focusing on the streaming, focusing on the covers, and doing your business a different way than you've ever done, and you need to focus on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the stimulus thing was huge. I'm very inspired by people, and I love to kind of write from people's stories and from what's happening. And I think what was happening, in America and the world was very heavy, and I know that there were people, and I've got a lot of friends who wrote those pandemic records and those COVID records. And gosh, some of them are beautiful, but all of them are tragic. All of them are hard. And I think to a certain degree, we were carrying some of that hardness, on our live streams. Like we were really kind of processing with people every Thursday, some of that stuff, and that was kind of our gift then. But I think other times I was just like, I can't read. Up until then, I think I've been reading the New York Times morning edition every single day, and I got to a place in 2020 where I'm just like, I need to. I just
can't take a break.
Feels
yeah,
really heavy. Exactly. Yeah, it was an act of self-care to say, I need to take a step back from this, because it all feels so impossibly heavy. Yeah, I mean, I think, since then I've just definitely been writing things, and I've got a potential another Ben Grace album in the works, and I think a few of those things will a few of those songs around the hardness and the heaviness of COVID. Some of those songs probably make it in there as well. But I felt like I had to get a little bit of distance from it in order to kind of write about that effectively.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned.
Are you still streaming?
No, we're streaming about once a month at the moment, just to sort of stay in touch with some of those folks that we used to see. I put that in Rapid's ears. We used to see every week.
Yeah.
And some of those people who are still. It's amazing. Some people have sort of forgotten that for some folks, the pandemic continues to be tricky. And some folks have been isolated because of severe health concerns. Have remained really isolated. So we're still live streaming to stay connected to some of those folks and stay connected to our patrons and people who came along the journey with us. But not regularly. I think, as soon as we can sort of get out there and be in the world with humans and be in rooms with human bodies, that was really, really important. And we've really treasured that time to get out there and play live music in front of people again.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier that you like to plan, which is great, because a lot of artists and creatives don't.
Yeah.
But if you're planning, you're probably like me, where you feel you always have to be productive. You always have to be doing something. And do you have what you would consider a busy season that helps you plan?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been really curious about over the years, when I first discovered the liturgical seasons, I was really blown away by that, because I think in modern life, we're very disconnected from the rhythms of the earth. Up until the end of the agrarian age, we were very dependent on the seasons. When the rains would come, when you would plant, when the harvest would come. So we're a very different society, and a lot of the church calendar. I mean, things like Christmas and Easter are built around those equinoxes. They're built around, Christmas is the longest, the darkest night of the year, and so this idea of bringing a light into the world is a symbol of hope, that in the longest, darkest days of the year, that hang on, the light is coming. And then
I thought that was
Easter.
I thought it was Santa, but I'm.
Yeah. well, I've educated
Ben's
you
like,
this
don't
morning.
get me started.
That's right. Learn something new every day. Wow. Okay. Kids,
and then,
don't worry about this episode. You don't have to listen, but everybody else can.
Exactly. And then Easter is this harvest time. It's like, hey, the world is coming back to life. We're kind of planting things because the things spring out from the ground. And so for me, I was fascinated by that idea of what do the seasons have to teach us about living, creatively in the modern world, and living in seasons ourselves, and like I said, in 2020, we were recording a lot, we were live streaming a lot. And so writing just didn't really have the energy necessarily for that. And I've always long loved the idea of kind of, in the summer seasons when you have festivals, when you have touring as an option, all that kind of stuff, that you sort of live on the road, you go out there, you do that live thing. But then in the winter, when it's cold and the roads are harder to navigate, you hunker down and you write and you record the record.
Yes.
So we're trying to live into that a little bit, kind of now. It's why we kind of put out the Story in Tune record at the, in the spring, at the start of the summer, and we're trying to get out there and play that. And we toured the West Coast from San Diego all the way up to Seattle, and
nice.
and doing a lot of touring. But then we're about to move to Portland, Oregon, so we're in a really busy season because we're trying to hand off a lot of the things that I built down here in San Diego, a lot of the communities that I built in the time I've been here. And then we're obviously trying to pack and then move up and move into a different stage of life. So, yeah, I think, I have found myself in this process of moving, having these thoughts of frustration of like, oh, I don't really feel like I'm getting as much done musically as I would. And then I'm just like, got to take a step back and go, hey, the season of my life I'm in is in this really beautiful season of handing off these things I've built, and that's really holy and sacred. And because I get to move out of San Diego, this city that I've really loved and I've really invested in, and this community that around me, the songwriting community I adore, and I get to do that well, also so that we can come back, and reunite here, and we can play shows, and so kind of realizing that hectic pace of modern life where you just like everything has to be go, sort of this capitalistic idea that we just have to sort of produce all the time and be on all the time and be working all the time is just, it's unsustainable. It's not how the world was designed. It's against nature herself.
You've mentioned a few times about Story and Tune. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah, so Story in Tune is the partnership between myself and my wife. We met in 2018 online. I saw her, she's a poet, and I saw her writing on Instagram through a mutual friend, and it was absolutely blown away by how she used words. As someone who's written up my entire life, I adore words. Obviously, my first album is called As If Words Could Heal the Wounds. So I really do think that the written and the spoken word and language itself has such a power to shape worlds that we don't even see yet. That words can be prophetic, and they can be, they can bring things into the world that didn't exist before. So I've always, loved words, and then I saw the way Karen used words, and I was like, wow, that woman knows how to use words. So I followed along for a few months. And and
you found out she was single, so you thought, okay, one thing led to another.
Well, I didn't really know that at first.
Right to his heart.
That's right.
Yeah, I didn't know that at first, and I was coming out of a really long marriage, and it was my life was very, very messy, and there was a lot of grief there. But so at first I was just following along as someone who just loved poetry, and it's how I used Instagram. Really was to follow poets and follow artists. And I was posting a lot of articulate things on her Instagram posts, like ugh and gah, really endearing myself to the words people. But eventually, after a few months, I think I saw her post something, and I was like, she'd kind of tagged someone else, and it was like, that's a lyric, and I'm pretty sure she co-wrote that lyric. So I slid into her DMs and was like, hey, like, it seems like you might collaborate with songwriters. Do you want to write a song sometime? And she didn't block me immediately, which was great. and we had
used the right
friends,
line.
I know. And she was like, she thought it was a pickup line. Now she realizes I say that to everybody on the internet. Like, I love co-writing. I love collaborating. And so she's like, oh, I wasn't special after all. but we did wind up collaborating, and it was about a month. I think we sort of chatted a little bit backwards and forwards and sent some stuff. And then I was on tour in the UK, and she posted something on Instagram, and I happened to have a day off in a hotel room in Birmingham. And I picked up my little electric mandolin, and I wrote a chorus to the stuff that she just posted. And I messaged her and said, hey, I just wrote something. How do I get it to you? Because you can't send audio across Instagram. I got her cell number, and that was the beginning of the end. Because
of course, yes.
I then called her, like, within a day, and we talked on the phone. And our first single was called Birmingham because it was that song that we actually wrote and finished while I was in the UK. And so we wrote our first song before we even met in real life.
No kidding. That's neat.
We then had a pretty whirlwind romance that was all cross texts, and I traveled around Dublin with her in my pocket. Like in fact, in her phone, my contact is saved. My nickname is Pocket because I had her in my pocket as I traveled, and then we finally met in Colorado in Thanksgiving of 2018, and and we just continued to write. We wrote a lot. We had a long distance relationship there for a few months. From Colorado to San Diego, and we wrote a song called Write the Fear a Lullaby, which is on my Ben Grace record, which was a conversation really between the two of us as we're entering into this relationship and dating. And there's a lot of, just a lot of fear around kind of dating when you're, kind of in your midlife and you've had a couple of relationships and that fear of how do you do this again? How do you open up to somebody, and that vulnerability is really, really hard. So we wrote a lot of songs before we kind of even really kind of merged our lives together. And then Story and Tune became sort of the brand that we put there that was basically the marriage of her words and my melodies. So that first album, the debut album, is called Light from the Break, I should say. And it's something we've been working on for ages. And that whole record is all Karen's lyrics and mostly my melodies. Sometimes she'll also have melody ideas too. It's a really interesting collaboration because, oftentimes with co-writing, you're in the same room at the same time writing both of those things together. But Karen's process oftentimes, she just has these moments of sheer brilliance and she'll have a song and write it within, a few minutes, which is infuriatingly amazing. And then she'll hand it off to me and I'll kind of write the melody. So yeah, it's a wonderful project. We're really proud of the album. It's produced locally by a legend here called Jeff Berkeley, who has produced everyone from Jason Mraz to almost 300 San Diego artists. He's a wonderful, wonderful human.
You seem to have a lot of different projects and brands on the go. So how do you focus the right amount of time to each? Because you mentioned that you've got another Ben Grace album coming out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's always, once again, I feel like that's a season thing for sure. And I kind of have started to turn my attention to that Ben Grace project as I feel like I start to, kind of get a sense of, this song should fit on that and this song should fit on that. I just start to think about kind of what it looks like to start collecting those. And we're very lucky, I think, with the Story and Tune album. We made it very, very quickly because Jeff Berkeley moves very, very fast. And we just sort of handed over the project to him and he kind of, really went to town on it. So yeah, it's one of those things where some days you're going from, I'll wake up in the morning and, do a little work, for my church gig, and then I'll go and write some kid songs for a project, and then, we'll go out and play a covers gig that night. So that it's often you have to just be wearing multiple hats and just jumping from thing to thing. But like I said, just grateful to be doing what I'm doing, and I don't know, something about that provides me with a lot of energy. As long as I don't have to do two things at once. Karen can multitask. I can't. I have to be like, no, I've got to be done writing this kid song, and then I can think about the covers gig. I can't have both of those tabs open in my brain.
I suck at multitasking, admittedly.
Yeah, multitasking is a gift for sure.
You just have to have a list and cross it off, and if you're halfway through it, you just have to note where you are. But it can be It can be confusing with all the different things you've got and all the plates you're managing. Is there any overlap, like as far as Ben Grace versus Story and Time, or even some of the kid stuff?
Yeah, I would say the one thing that holds all those together is the thing that we keep on coming back to. And I guess, this is the thing I think we kind of grow up in church kind of learning, right, is about belonging. I read this terrific book by Tokapar Turner called Belonging. It's very, very dense. I think I've heard a bit of the conversation around dreams, and that book is all about dream work. What is your unconscious kind of telling you, and what's the stories that are coming up? And
sure.
Yeah, I think our thing, no matter if we're writing for kids songs or we're writing for church songs we're writing for our own original stuff, it's all really the insistence that you belong as you are.
Yeah.
That you are whole, that you are loved, and that there's a lot of voices in life that will tell you that you don't belong. I think there's a lot that's built into capitalism, which is you belong, but in a certain place. In a certain kind of utilitarian thing that you belong, rather than just a really existential you belong. And you're worth it. And so we're always, I think, trying to write that in whatever we're doing, and in our covers sets as well. Like I've spent 20 years being a musician, always resisted kind of doing covers music, and now we, make a decent living out of that. But I think we're just trying to, bring people joy. We've been through a really, really dark season, of life.
Yeah.
And to just kind of bring some smiles to people's faces and to sing a song that people love so they can feel seen. And they can go, oh, thank you so much, or bring a tear to someone's eye because you sang their grandma's favorite song. Like, I think music has this power to deeply connect us and to kind of articulate, a really, really deep part of who we are as humans.
Even with covers, because often they're songs that people know, you get the participation, you get the people being involved and participating in that song.
Yeah, it's such a joy. It's such a joy. I mean, songs, that sometimes at times when I turn my nose up at like songs that feel cheesy, like a Sweet Caroline, like there's just nothing better, I think, than the whole room going, ba, ba, ba. Like
that's right.
We love uniting people. And I think in times that I feel like have left us very, very divided along, cultural lines, along, spiritual lines, along political lines, like the power of a song, the power of us all singing together. It's not even singing together. I made a realization recently that I've been in church. I've been trying to encourage us to kind of take some time, particularly in those really hard days when we kind of bring towards our communities, victims of gun violence or kind of acts of racism, that I've just got us to stand together and breathe together. And that's what I think is powerful is, sure, maybe you hear the melody, but in between when we all have to take a breath together, like something about that to me is like, that's where the divine dwells, in our breath, the just spirit, ruach, breath, like that really guttural thing, the thing that brings us life when our breaths align. I think that's beautiful. And I hope to see a world where politically we start to take a breath together, rather than fighting for other people's breaths.
That's interesting.
It's very deep, actually, when you think of it.
Yeah, it is.
I suppose that's the intent.
Yeah,
I'm just a simple man. When you talk about corporate worship, just from a very simplistic standpoint, there's the breath, and there's also the singing a song that everyone knows, just so they can participate. Instead of, sometimes you go to a church and maybe you're visiting or whatever, and you don't know any of the songs. So how can you participate? How can you be a part of that corporate worship when you don't know any of the songs? You're just looking at the lyrics on the wall or on the screen, trying to participate, but you really don't know the songs. And yet if you just sing a simple chorus or the chorus of an old hymn or something like that most people would know, it just encourages people to get in there and participate.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's the eternal, problem in church is how do you sing stuff? How do we sing a new song, right? Well, and how do we sing it so it actually unites people, as opposed to like have half the people being like, oh man, I don't know that. That's it. That's it's not a hymn that I know or something like that. There's a really beautiful line I think there about how to teach people to participate. And I've always loved, I think, in the gospel tradition that you have a song leader. There's a single person that might be kind of singing a solo, and instead of just kind of standing there passively, our role is to encourage that person to absolutely like take it to the heights, like just tear the roof off vocally. And so I think there's so many like models there, but all of that I think is that same thing, like in between the phrase of the gospel church, when the person is like, when in between the two melodies or the piano's taking a break, that's when the congregation rises up to say, sing. Let's sing together, and that kind of moment where we're still united. We might be united in really encouraging someone to reach the best of themselves and the heights of themselves, but that's still a uniting factor. It's phenomenal. It's so powerful. We get to do that, and I think that the art of communal singing together, the gathering around music, some part of that I feel like has been lost a little bit, and I'm also really kind of discouraged by places like Live Nation, where ticket prices post-pandemic are so high. I'm just kind of like, man, music is for everyone, isn't it? But like, I can't afford to go see some of my favorite artists because the tickets are thousands of dollars. Like that just, it's really, really hard. I think music is something that should be democratized. It should be for all of us. It started, we've historically sung music in the parlors of our homes, or around a campfire and things like that. And that's the thing that place I come back to. Music is for everybody, and we should be able to figure out how to sing something together, all together.
I wish when artists have concerts or times together where you have to buy a ticket, I kind of wish that the consumer could see the breakdown of how they arrived at that price.
Yeah.
Because very often that price includes, the rental of the venue and whether it be taxes or service charges that they incur that we wouldn't necessarily understand. And then we just think, you're paying hundreds of dollars for this ticket and you think it's all going to the artist when that's not necessarily the case. And the flip side of that is hundreds of dollars going to the artist, and you think to yourself, really? Do you need to be making that kind of money? Like, you're getting all this other money through your streams and through your merch and everything else. It shouldn't be, all based on finances,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of finding the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the side of doing music as a business, right? It's one of those things where I talk to friends who, aren't musicians, who are just business owners, and, there's 1,000 getting a product to market. There are thousands of people who that goes through. There are 1,000 people who touch that. And trying to kind of make that fair, make a living wage fair for everybody along that process is really hard. And I think music is no different. I'm realizing that to make music these days takes a village. And I want to make sure that the people who produce my records, make money and feel good about that. And I want to make sure that the venue itself, when we show up there and we play a show, I want to make sure that they're happy. We just did this tour up the West Coast, and, we're not a massive band by any means. And we didn't have, huge crowds, but we had really, really solid people who came out to see us. And there was one particular venue we played, and they were just like, they were just like so blown away. They were like, you guys were unbelievable. Like, that was the best live night we've ever had in this venue. And we're just like, they're like, they were apologetic. They're just like, we didn't really know what the show was about. And we wish there were like, triple, quadruple amount of people that were here. And they just said to us, we're waiving our fee for the evening. Like, we're going to give you the entire take from the day, because we just really appreciate you guys coming in. And we're just like, hey, we want you to make money too. But at the same time, they're making money off drinks and food and all that kind of stuff. And that's the reality is that, a lot of times the venue makes money off that side. And I never want to deny anybody a crust for what they do. I just think that on a certain level, once you tick to the level of Live Nation, for instance, that just feels like grease to me, whereas those prices are absolutely ludicrous for not many reasons whatsoever.
Well, you need shares in Live Nation, and because somebody's making money there.
Right.
Not necessarily the artist, but anyways.
No.
Listen, Ben, it's been a pleasure to connect with you once again. Really enjoyed our conversation. I could just sit back and not say anything and just let you talk, but it's nice just
and enjoy the accent.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very refreshing, and it's nice to see. Obviously we're post-pandemic now. It's nice to see how things have evolved, and it's still it's still tough. It's still tough for musicians, for artists and stuff. It's not. I don't know how half the artists and musicians that are out there actually make a living without a side hustle, honestly, because there's so much taken from you already, even the streaming stuff. Like, how many times does somebody have to listen to a song before you actually make 5 cents on it? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, thousands of times is the answer to that question.
I know. And that's just got to be really, really frustrating because you want to come out with good content. Again, here's that word, content, but good quality music, and all of that takes time and it takes money. And like you say, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that make all that happen for you, and then you get your 5 cents, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like the way you put that. You get your 5 cents.
Yeah, literally. Thoroughly enjoyed that conversation with Ben Grace. Great to have him back on Between the Grooves. Nice to catch up. You can check out everything about Ben Grace and everything that he's up to at bengracemusic.com.
All right. And right here, we're going to have some artist advice by the great lady, Miss Tuzi.
Believe there is a God, believe in yourself, and believe too that there is a God. He didn't give you these dreams because, he has a plan, right? I think it's not easy to start. I find, like, I don't know, Aisha, how yours were, but I find it's just starting and believing in yourself that you're good enough, that God's giving you something that he wants the world, like he wants people to hear it. That's why he gave it to you. Sure. I know, like, it's a lot of like, well, I don't think I've written that song yet. I don't think I'm there yet. But if God's giving you something, go for it. Like, trust him and go for it. I think that will be one of mine advice would be, believe in yourself and believe there is a God that's inspired you. It's not like you didn't just come up with the idea. If he wants you to do it, do it. You are enough.
Yeah, having that dream, believing in yourself, and actually doing something with it as well, the follow through.
Mm-hmm. Gotta be proactive.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking to start with anything. It doesn't have to be music. It doesn't have to be songwriting. It can be anything that you do in life. Just taking that step, that leap of faith, as it were.
Right.
Some wise words from Tuzi on Between the Grooves, and that is it for this week. We are out of time.
We are. So if you want to check us out wherever it is that you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Faith Strong Today's Between the Grooves podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your friends, rating our podcast, or giving us some love on your socials to your amazing friends and followers will only help us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you and share your feedback in an upcoming episode. Send your video or written message to Aisha and James on Facebook and Twitter @Between Grooves, or email us anytime, hello@faithstrongtoday.com.